Hi, my name is Cassidy Brown, and I did a research study on what factors influence Generation Y to be loyal to certain sportswear brands. The reason I found this to be important is because sportswear has become more prominent within the retail industry. In past years, sportswear was worn for the purpose of performance or basic workouts, but currently consumers, especially Generation Y, have named it athleisure wear, meaning athletic apparel worn as a form of fashion for everyday life. So it's important for designers to start creating their own trendy athletic line to keep up with the forever revolving fashion industry. And having knowledge of these loyalty influences can alter how they create these lines and what they should focus on for Generation Y consumers. So the question that needs to be answered for retailers is what functionality is sportswear being worn for, comfort or fashion, and what factors influence their decisions. Therefore, the purpose of this study is to determine what factors affect brand loyalty towards popular sportswear brands. Retailers and fashion designers will benefit from learning the loyalty influences of Generation Y consumers towards sportswear brands because they can alter their designs and purchases to fit the consumer needs, which will increase their own brand loyalty and profitability. So, starting with my two hypotheses, I decided that for my first hypothesis, Generation Y consumers will be loyal to the same sportswear brand within the same gender. So, for Generation Y females, they'll be brand loyal to Under Armour, and Generation Y males will be brand loyal to Nike. For hypothesis 2, the loyalty factor with the biggest presence in sportswear brands of Generation Y consumers is brand name recognition. That also relates back to hypothesis 1, which is why I chose Under Armour and Nike. Because Under Armour, although Nike seems to be more a bigger brand name than Under Armour is huge for Texas Tech athletics. So I thought that would be pretty dominant within this area. For the methodology and sample, the data in this research was recorded from May 30th to April 23rd. I posted a link of Qualtrics survey to Twitter and Tumblr to get a variety of people. The sample consisted of both males and females of Generation Y who wear sportswear once or twice a week. And there was a specific age range from 19 to 22 years old. So at the beginning of the survey, I had two qualifying questions that asked what their age was, and if they were 18 or 23 or higher, they were kicked out of the survey, and also if they wore sportswear once or twice a week, which is important because if I'm focusing on what influences brand loyalty to sportswear, they have to be people that wear sportswear frequently. And out of the 30 respondents, 14 were male and 16 were female. That was important because I did have a hypothesis based on gender. So I made sure to get an almost equal amount, if not equal, of each gender to get a good representation for that hypothesis. And the age that responded the most was 21 years old. They had 12 respondents, and age 19 had 8, age 20 had 6, and age 22 had 4 respondents. The instrument was developed by the researcher based on the two hypotheses, which included demographic questions, psychographic, behavioral, and the survey had a variety of different ways to ask the questions. So ranking, Likert scale, fill in the blank, and multiple choice questions. So for the graph that you see on this poster, it's asking why or why not would you choose your most favorable brand compared to a similar cheaper brand. In the survey, I asked a question very similar to this, that if I gave you your most favorable brand and then I put a brand, I gave another product that had the exact similarities, it didn't have that brand name, and it was cheaper, would you choose that product or your most favorable brand? And actually 67% of Generation Y consumers said they would still choose their most favorable brand. And 33% said they would go with the cheaper product. And the reason they chose their most favorable brand is because 47% said brand loyalty. So Generation Y is brand loyal, but to only some extent, because 20% said they would go with the cheaper product because of the price. And product quality and brand name weren't that influential. So that kind of goes against my hypothesis that say brand name recognition was the biggest loyalty factor. And then other was just people that didn't care or didn't have an opinion. As for my data analysis, hypothesis one, I asked a question, what was last purchased what they last purchased, and what was the brand of that item? And 38% Nike, 18% said Adidas, and then so forth. Which what stood out to me was that the difference between Nike and the other brand was 20%. So most people had purchased Nike. And then again, Nike had a mean of 1.87. So when they were ranked their most and least favorable brand, so that was by far their most favorable brand. And the second one was Under Armour at 3.77. So again, it was almost 2 whole point difference. So I think that shows that Nike is more dominant overall between females and males, not just one or the other. And then 53% of the participants said they were most loyal toward Nike, and 13% were most loyal toward Lululemon. And that was the next highest. So again, Nike by far is the most brand loyal between Generation Y consumers. And in the survey, I asked Under Armour, or I made a statement in a Likert scale question that said Under Armour is most popular amongst girls. This had a meaning of 4, which demonstrates that they neither agreed or disagreed with that statement. And actually, when I cross-tabulated that question and with genders, about half males said that Under Armour was more prominent amongst females, whereas when the females answered it, only one girl said that was true. So it clearly shows that females are not more brand loyal to Under Armour. And then I also put kind of the same question or statement that Nike is most popular amongst guys, and that actually had a meaning of 2. So most guys agreed with that statement. Females and males agreed with that statement. As for hypothesis 2, even though brand name recognition had a high percent of 23% of respondents, followed by comfort with 20%, style was the number one answer to the reason of brand loyalty at 30%. So like I said earlier, style is really important because they're wearing it for everyday use, to go to class, to hang out with friends, to work out, all the above. They're not just using it for performance or athletic purposes. So in conclusion, the researcher rejected both the hypothesis because gender was not the reason that Generation Y consumers were loyal to a certain brand. Females and males were both loyal to Nike, far beyond Under Armour or any other brand name, at least within the 30 respondents. And as for the second hypothesis, style was also the biggest loyalty factor and not brand name recognition. So Generation Y consumers see sportswear as a sense of identity, meaning a healthy and free life. So that's also another reason that it's becoming more prominent, because wearing athletic apparel means that you have a healthy lifestyle and that you can afford to do those things and eat right and all the above. It just shows your status. So in conclusion, Under Armour needs to enhance their brand loyalty and establish a stronger emotion for Generation Y consumers towards their brand name. And Nike needs to continue focusing sales on males since they're doing so great, and maybe grow their loyalty for females. And as for the loyalty factors, considering Generation Y consumers are mostly drawn to style of the sportswear garment, it is paramount that retailers listen and create historic designs. It's also important that they don't focus on price. If they need to increase the cost of their product because they need a better design, that's important, because as that graph shows, as long as they're brand loyal and style brings brand loyalty, price is not going to contribute. And that's also shown with Yi and Sadek, their study. They said price was an important consideration for the average consumer, but consumers with high brand loyalty were less price sensitive. So that just shows again, with my study as well, that price will not be important as long as you have brand loyalty. So as for implications and recommendations, there is definitely a need for style and sportswear merchandise. Retailers need to create quality styles for sportswear that match the latest trends for daily wear, as well as functionality for working out, because that is what consumers are looking toward. Companies should improve their product quality and engrave their brand name and culture into the minds of these individuals to benefit profitability. Alterations that I would have changed to my study was widening the range of ages. I really didn't have that big of a range, and I had people that were responding that were either 18 or higher than 22, which are still part of Generation Y. And using a larger group of respondents, maybe 100 could give a better representation than 30. And equaling the number of different ethnicities. I had a lot of African American and white respondents, but not many of any other ethnicity. So I think that would also change the results. And then I also thought about creating 3 groups within the survey to define themselves as either athletes, those that live a healthy lifestyle, or average consumers, because that would also differentiate of what brand they're loyal to and why they're so loyal to that brand. So one recommendation for further study is to create more questions about brand loyalty so that the results can specifically identify how brand loyal females, males, and Generation Y are as a whole. The main focus for continuing study on this topic is to elaborate and obtain a higher sense of information about brand loyalty and what other factors can cause these consumers to gain brand loyalty. So in conclusion, the factor that influences Generation Y to be loyal to certain sportswear brands is style. And they're most loyal towards Nike, males and females, and it's not based on gender.